If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Tonight's guest is Nathan. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Vic. Good evening. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate your time. Nathan, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Sure. So, my name is Nathan. I'm 55 years of age. I live in the UK and in the area of North Wales. So, I'm coming on tonight because a friend of mine called Athena came on the other week, and we've been talking about this because I introduced her to Vic's show, and I've been a follower of the show since around 2016, which was part of a coming to speak to everyone tonight and talk about my life and my experiences is part of a recent kind of 25-year journey from an experience I had in the US in 2001.
You're starting to make me feel old talking about listening to me since 2016. That's a while ago. You just mentioned that first encounter that you had 25 years ago. Before you had that experience, did you take the whole cryptid phenomenon seriously or as a punchline?
Well, growing up in the 70s, I was introduced to Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that might remember that. So I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film when I was quite young, but also I had the books on everything. So I was always interested in mythology. And then as we get into this episode, you'll understand what happened to me along my life and how all of this seems to weave into my experience and the path that my life kind of took, whether I liked that or not. It's very much interwoven, and that's why I wanted to come forward and speak. And I did wish to come forward sooner, but because of certain positions I held in life, professionally and personally, I had to be very careful and considerate about my personal experiences or spiritual experiences, which a lot of people consider to be quite woo or quite far out. And that would have possibly compromised some of the things that I was doing at sort of local and national level. So I have also reached out to other podcasts, quite well-renowned ones, but I got replies, but never a follow-up, Vic. So it's kind of serendipity that it's come round to speaking to you because you're the person that I've really kind of followed the longest. So it's really nice to finally connect with you and be part of the history of Dogman Encounters Radio.
Well, thanks again for reaching out. I'm glad you did. And thanks, too, for sending Athena. I really appreciate you doing that as well. Although from what I hear, you were kind of disappointed that you weren't able to come on last week's show with her.
Oh, yeah, she's so cheeky. We were in a friend's kitchen discussing it, and I said, we should go on together because we were a great double act, her and I. And it's one of the great things about our friendship that we really bounce off each other with the crazy sense of humor. But we've also explored, enough spiritual parts of ourselves with common experience that it's one of the reasons that we sort of connect so well. So when I was lying in bed in the early hours of the Saturday morning and put the podcast on, and I kind of fluffed the first part of the intro, didn't catch her name, and then she said, "Oh, I'm 50, I'm from North Wales." I thought, "Oh wow, there's somebody from North Wales." And then I realised who it was, and I was like, "That you cheeky cow." I was like, right, that does it. You've thrown down the gauntlet. I'm getting in touch with Vic. So, as soon as it was daylight, I sent her a text and expressing my surprise. And so she very kindly said, "Oh, I'll reach out to Vic for you." I was like that, yeah.
An insider.
Yeah. So it was funny, but it's nice to finally sort of come on and talk about the kind of this side of my life's experience, which is definitely, the more kind of strange but interesting side of it. And I hope that it just gives some of the listeners insights and comparisons to a lot of their experiences, both with Dogmen and with Sasquatch, and compared to some of the things I've experienced in the UK. And obviously I'm someone that's had experiences in the UK, and then obviously I had that experience in the US in 2001. So I think there's a commonality in the phenomenon, and I hope that's what I can convey as a conclusion for people, in my mind anyway, in my experience.
That's the thing about you. You're not going to just talk about the Dogman encounters that you've had. It seems to me like you're a magnet for scary things. For some reason, scary things are just drawn to you.
Yeah, and ever since I worked out that Dogmen are actually in the UK, like I said to you, I've been a lot more careful about going out in the woods and up the hills and mountains at night by myself, which I used to love to do. But it made me very wary, just more considerate of what's around. Not that I've ever felt really in danger, but it's just an acknowledgement of, because I've listened to so many episodes and found out that a lot of places that I've been, people in the UK have had sightings and experiences with these creatures. So it made me just sit up and take notice, shall we say.
Well, unfortunately, Nathan, I've got some bad news for you. Anytime I bring a guest on from overseas, most notably via UK, I get a lot of messages from people who live over there to let me know that it's all nonsense because there are no cryptids in the UK. It's too small. There's no place for them to live. So, unfortunately, you didn't have any of the experiences that you've come on to tell us about tonight.
Well, apparently not. And this has been something which I've been involved in the kind of on my own spiritual journey for a long, long time, since probably the age of 19. And so I've got involved in the UFO field, and I've worked as a therapist. I still am a therapist. I'm a trained hypnotherapist, but also I've worked and trained with people in the US. So I've had some really fantastic experiences. But one thing I've always been really, really firm about is the fact that you cannot tell someone else they haven't experienced that thing, because it's their experience. I mean, it's so arrogant to assume that you can say, well, I don't have that experience, therefore you can't have had it. And I think that for me, because I've worked with so many people on so many different topics over the years, that for me, I now suspend all judgment, or try to, because we simply don't know. And I think that's as well another aspect to my, reason for coming forward, is we don't really understand, I feel, we don't really understand the world that we live in. We live in a very narrow band of perception. There is much more going on around us. And I believe that what we're seeing with a lot of these phenomena, shall we say, is trying to show us that that's exactly the way things are. We don't have all the answers. And that's why I think people have encounters, because people have had encounters from the most self-aware people to people that are very down to earth and grounded. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason why those encounters have happened to people. And in many cases, you listen to the emotion in those people's voices when they're trying to convey what's gone on for them in a really traumatic experience that changed the course of their life forever. So I think we just need to be more compassionate and just say, you know what, we might have ideas, we might have opinions, but there's not one of us that's really an expert. And so I don't claim to be any kind of expert. I am an experiencer. I am a therapist. I've had my own journey in the kind of woo, but I've also had a very grounded life and had an interesting journey in that path. And I don't think the modern material world is actually a very easy or safe place to navigate in general without piling on these, strange experiences that take us unawares. I'm probably somebody that's been more prepared for those experiences because of my early life and my childhood and the path that my life took, which I think when I get into that, people will understand that, there's been a lot of neglect in my childhood, a lot of abuse, but also that kind of pushed me into my spiritual life. And so I'm someone that's kind of walked a path where I've just tried to have a normal life, be happy, get on like everyone else, have all the things and be a good person. It hasn't always worked out that way. And as I've got older, the challenges of my own mental health became far sharper to me. For years, I've been, really resilient. And I think sometimes life just throws you a curveball and you hit that wall and you have to face up to what happened to you. So I'm not somebody that sits here and says, oh, it's all about having a wonderful life. It's been very difficult. It's been very traumatic. I ended up being diagnosed with complex PTSD in about 2018. It took me 4 years to get that diagnosis, and I knew what was wrong with me. So it's quite a challenge, particularly as a man, to get any help about your mental health, which is something that I've been working on and supporting other people and, creating projects which really supported men's mental health and tackled the sort of terrible problems of male suicide that we have in every first world nation, but particularly in the UK. So, yeah, it's been a real journey. And so if you can get an idea of who I am as a person, it's like I feel like I've got a foot in both worlds, if you like. I can take on board the kind of more spiritual and supernatural experiences, but I also have been I'm a very grounded and practical person. I think that's probably what's allowed me to integrate those sides of myself, because I've always managed to keep it real. And when it's got too weird, I have just kind of, walked away, put the whole thing down for a while, gone out and done something. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to go for a pint down the pub. I'm just going to go for a walk and forget about that. Just do something practical. Because sometimes the mysterious side of things can get so weird. It gets so weird and so intangible that you drive yourself mad. It's like, like they say, or, you don't get the answer doesn't become more clear. You just end up with more questions. Well, I think that's what a lot of people are finding. And particularly in this field, there's people that think they have a definitive answer, but then something else happens and, no, that wasn't the definitive answer. It's like it opens up a whole other world of questions. So for me, I think some of the things I want to share tonight are because there's things which having listened to so many people's experiences, that now for me, it's like there's a connecting thread in between, and some of my experiences might help to fill those gaps for people. And if that's what I can do and it helps someone to integrate their experience or puts it into perspective for them, then job done, Vic. That's why I'm here.
I think it's awfully impressive that even though you're dealing with the PTSD you're dealing with due to your traumatic experiences, the fact that you still focus on helping other people who have been traumatized by their experiences come to terms with theirs, I think it says everything about your altruistic character. I think it really does. But having said that, you've got a lot to unpack for us. Please tell us about your encounters now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Yeah, so what really kicked off this journey that's brought me here to speak to you and to the listeners tonight, something happened in 2001 in a place called Mountain Ranch, California. And this is what really, as it was coming round to the 20th anniversary, I guess, of that experience, trying to work out what exactly I had encountered became a valuable little journey of investigation, which led me to listen to Dogman encounters, because the thing that I encountered, I wasn't sure whether it was a Sasquatch, but the impression that I got was that this thing was canine. And at the time, and I'll get into more detail in it shortly, but at the time, I couldn't understand what on earth I was picking up. Now, I'll say picking up. What am I talking about? Well, I'm quite a sensitive. I've got really good spidey senses, if you like, that more than often than not do turn out to be very, very accurate. They don't always save me from everything in life, but I always get some kind of intuition or feeling about things. So, it was a person, a kind of spiritual teacher, a man called Ken Page, who I've been working with since 1995. I began really that part of my spiritual journey. I'd worked with different spiritual teachers, but really because I'd had my own spiritual awakening, and everyone that I went on courses with just began to really sharpen and hone those experiences and those gifts and abilities. And so I went at the age of 24, just before my 25th birthday, and because of my childhood, the trauma of my kind of upbringing and the way that it left me feeling, I never felt I was going to live past the age of 25. I had a really strong feeling that I was going to die before I was 25 because life had been pretty rough. And it just seemed that that got into my head. So I went on this course in Austin, Texas. And at that time, as usual, I was usually one of the youngest people there because I was only in my early 20s. And working with Ken was fantastic because we had a really, really great connection. And he taught me about being an empath. Now, I know there's a lot of people that say, oh, yeah, I'm an empath. They're an empath. And, well, for me, it's not a label. It's something which I am a living, breathing example of. As I've grown older, it was something which really, really troubled me in younger life. But when I worked with Ken out there in the US in 95, it began to show me just how powerful that gift can be. Not only that, but it enabled me to differentiate with it and to be able to shut it down and switch it on to the point where now I can go into a crowded environment, although I find them still a little bit overwhelming, but I can shut that noise out. Otherwise, it'll be overwhelming and really, really difficult to handle. When I'm in a therapeutic setting, or I can focus on a single person to connect with, then I can pick up certain impressions or feelings or insights over thousands of miles. And there's people that I've gone on to recently in the last couple of years. I've gone on to spaces on X, on Twitter. We've been in some really great kind of encounter groups, experiencer groups, and I've tuned into people over thousands of miles away and picked up exactly what's been going on with them on some level, be that physical, emotional, mental, or even sort of subconsciously, an energy pattern around them. So that gift is something which I've used it therapeutically for years, but I've never really settled down and gone, this is the one thing that I do. There are people out there, some people call them medical intuitives. There's quite a few well-renowned people that do exactly the sort of thing that I can do. So I kind of have often shelved that side of myself in life and just got on with what I needed to do, what was in front of me, working jobs, keeping a house, living a life. So yeah, what led me then was from 1995, life moved on and I bought a house, settled into a job, regular job, and then the advert came round from Ken that we were going to have a teacher training running in his new home in Mountain Ranch in California in April of 2001. So I bought my house in the kind of August of that year, renovated it, moved into it in December. got my first credit card. So when the news came around that Ken was running his teacher training, I was like, I got a credit card. I'm booking a flight. I'm going, because I felt like that the people that do the work, and I felt that I was more like part of the work. I would, struggle to probably define what I mean by that. But for me, it was something which literally was part of my DNA. So it's a very advanced hypnotherapeutic technique. So it involves exploring things like your deep subconscious mind, energy patterns, neural pathways. It can be past lives, parallel lives. We can use it to detect illnesses and what their root cause is. And it's a very, very, it's almost like, wow, talk about a reality changer, game changer in terms of, I still don't think it has much of a parallel, even to this day, in terms of the power of that therapeutic medium. And it was called multi-dimensional cellular healing. So it was about working with the cellular intelligence of your whole body, which is connected to your subconscious mind, which is part of our deeper consciousness. And so that's a really kind of really woo area, if you like, but it's fascinating when you tap into it and see the power of the subconscious mind or what it can do. So what went on was, it was 2001. The teacher training was advertised, so I jumped on a plane and got out to Mountain Ranch, California. Had a great time on the April training, met a load of people, great people. Where they are, their property that they had at the time was right out in the mountains. It was in the middle of a forest, built up on the side of a hill. About 4 hours, I think it's about 4 hours inland from San Francisco. So, it's a journey to get there, but a beautiful, beautiful area. Old gold rush country, as I recall. So and I met some really fantastic people that I'm still friends with to this day. And a few of us that really connected, we would go outside and hang out, at night talking. We made there was a little dell next to the house. We built a little fire pit there. And so we'd sit around and, swap stories, talk about life, explore the kind of mysteries, but also just enjoying the ambience of being in that beautiful area with nothing and nobody really around. So after that training, I had some really, really powerful experiences there, and then came home, got on with my everyday life. And then obviously the world had the very, very sad and traumatic experience of 9/11 in the September. And one of the people that I'd met on the course was a girl called April, who was about 21 at the time. We became really good friends, and she came over to visit me and my partner in the UK. I put her on a plane on that morning, went back to my job. She was meant to fly into Philadelphia, I think. And I got a phone call from my girlfriend at the time saying, "Nathan, have you heard from April?" And I'm sat at a desk in a job centre, and I said, "Well, no, why? She's still in the air." So I was unconcerned to put her on a plane this morning. And she said, "Oh, someone's attacked the Twin Towers. They've flown a plane, and planes have hit the Twin Towers in New York." So I didn't know what to do, because I'm sat there, I've got a schedule of clients to see that day. But on my lunch hour, I went out in the car and just drove where I was at the time. I could drive to the estuary of the sea. And very, very strange sort of experience. It took me, obviously I went home that night, watched all the footage on the TV, all of the people dying and buildings falling and all that chaos. And I had no idea whether my friend was alive or dead. And it really brought it home to me. But then I finally heard from her probably about 5 days later, and she had actually been diverted out of the air to somewhere in Canada. She ended up, I think in the end, staying with these Canadian families for about 2 weeks before she could get home back to Philly. So, then Ken had put the word round that he was running another training in November of 2001. And so I said, okay, great, I'm going to come out again, support the training, meet new people. I'm one of the trainers now, so I'm going to be kind of participating, but also on staff. And the modality would then, he changed the name to Heart and Soul Healing. So obviously that trip back to the US was very, very different, because in the wake of 9/11, the US became a very, very different place. I think the nation, you were still very much hurting from it all, the shock, the trauma. And so, everyone was far more on edge. There was a lot more people around with weapons, and obviously everyone flying the flag. So it wasn't as, pleasant a place as it had been in the earlier part of the year. The energy had changed quite a bit. And where they were in California, they'd had, I think, some wildfires that had really affected the landscape. They'd affected the water table, I remember Ken's water, actually, the water supply in the well turning, kind of yellow. And so there'd been a lot of drought and then fire. So the whole ecosystem was affected. But anyway, we sort of got there. April and I met up. We got a hired car in San Francisco, drove out into the mountains. And Ken had sent a message to say, when you come, don't drive up the main drive. We've just had it resurfaced. So if you can park up somewhere and then come up, and we'll let you through one of the other gates. So middle of the night, gets out to Mountain Ranch, finds their property, go past the gate to their drive. The gate's shut. Next to it, literally directly next to it, there was a little pull-off. It looked like another little road going kind of off to the left up the hill. So bearing in mind, you're surrounded by great big tall pine trees. There's nothing. I mean, the occasional lights you see from houses were very few and far between. Ken's property was illuminated, so we parked the car, the hired car, walked up by the drive, went in, said hi, had a chat, had a catch up, sat down, had a drink, and after about kind of 10 minutes or so, I said, right, I'm going to go and bring the car up and get the bags. So I wandered back down, and I'm not really paying attention because I'm still kind of buzzing, a bit jet lagged. It's late in the evening, so I'm kind of strung out, but in a good space. Got to the bottom of the hill down by the drive, turned left to go and see where the car was at, and the car was gone. So, I've been traveling for nearly 24 hours at this point. I'm so tired and strung out. So I don't know whether to be, completely enraged or just, laugh about it, or a mixture of both. Because my bags and passport, everything's in the car. I mean, who is going to steal that car in the middle of nowhere? So I got back into the house, and then there was a kind of a, where's my car? Who on earth has taken the car? What is going on in this crazy place? So after a couple of phone calls, it turned out that the neighbor had kindly had it towed for us. So anyway, there was a few head in hands moments. It was like, okay, well, what have we got to do to just get this done? So we finally got taken into the middle of nowhere, middle of the night, paid the fine, got the car back, drove it back all the way. And then this time we were allowed to take it up the drive. So I took it up the drive. The drive went up quite a steep little slope, probably about less than 100 yards. And then it opened out into a round area, which like a pull round, I guess, where you could come up and go round in front of the house and come back down. So it had like a sort of a, circular area at the top of the drive. And this was quite a steep slope. So And as you drove up to the top, the property would be on your right-hand side, and kind of going from right to left in front of you. And so I parked the car up on the kind of corner there, just sort of turned it right at the top of the drive, and then went back in the house, and we kind of, could laugh about it a bit then, I suppose. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to go and get the bags this time. And I went outside, went round to the trunk of the car, put the key in, popped the trunk, got my bag out. So I put my bag down on the ground and shut the trunk. All the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And something was clearly near me. And then what I picked up was this thing, whatever it was, which felt like it was quite a large thing, shifted its position, or it breathed. It did something like a shuffle, like a, and you go into that instant fight or flight, and something in my mind just said, "Don't run, just walk." And so, to give you an idea of where this was, probably within a car's length of where the drive came up to meet the kind of pull-in area, the pull round, because the drive was built up on a bank, and so was the pull round. It kind of made this little 90-degree angle where the two banks kind of met at 90 degrees, which made quite a little dip. And there were a few good-sized fir trees in there. So it made that area quite camouflaged. But that thing was within a car's length of me when I felt it and when I heard it. So I had no idea what it was, but I did the kind of, very swift and purposeful walk towards that front door. Got in, shut the door, and it was like, whoa, what was that? Now, bearing in mind, I live in the UK. I've been used to going up and down the hills and around the woods at night. I'm not really fazed by much because there's nothing, well, I didn't think there was much in the UK to ever really be wary of. We've got rid of most of our large creatures and predator and fauna many, many centuries ago. So there's really shouldn't be anything around. So when you pick up something and you are in technically a foreign country, then it becomes a question of, well, what was that? But it was clearly something. And all I could say was it felt large, and it also felt quite sentient, because the way that it made that noise, that little kind of like huff noise, it was almost like it was just shifting its posture a little bit and wasn't that interested in, well, it had me dead to rights. If it was a really serious predator, it would have had me right there and then, but it didn't. So got in the house, kind of put it out of my mind, just thought maybe you're just being a bit, a bit paranoid, or you're a bit strung out still and you need to just sleep. So, we had a few other people who were there in the house that were coming on the course with us. And so I ended up sleeping on the lounge floor on a camp bed that night. And then, the property was kind of a little bit illuminated outside, as I remember. So it wasn't that cold. And one of the windows, no, obviously you have mesh screens on everything in the US. And so the screen was across the window by the front door, but I think the window itself was open. And I just woke up because I was lying behind the sofa on this camp bed, and I just woke up with this overwhelming concern of a feeling that this thing was going to jump through the mesh. Almost like I could feel it poised to jump, and every fiber of my being was like, it's coming through the window. Whatever it is coming through the window, like was it a mountain lion or something, or something big on all fours that's going to come through the window? So I got up out of the bed, kept myself really low to the ground, kind of trying to duck under the window ledge, come up and actually shut the window. and locked it and put the screen back. And anyway, went back to bed. And so then the course went on for about 5 days. We had a lot of other people there milling around. It was a bit strange. And I just kept picking up this presence. And I remember halfway through the week going and talking to Ken. We were in the kitchen and his wife was there. And I was saying, you know I can tell you stuff like this because you're used to all the kind of like weird and woo stuff. But I said, I swear we're being stalked. Something is out there. I can feel it. There's something stalking this group. It's drawn to us somehow. And Ken was like, well, what do you think it is? And I said, well, look, I don't know. But I said, what have you got around here? Because it feels like to me, I said, no, it's going to sound strange, but it feels like it is canine. And I said, like a big canine creature, but, I can't be sure. So at that point, his wife sort of said to me, it was funny you should say that because only a few days ago, the neighbour from down the hill here in front of us, the neighbour called us and said, you need to be aware that there is a great big black feral dog roaming round. We've seen it. It's come through our property. It was heading towards your property kind of thing. So she said, maybe that's what you're picking up. And I said, well, yeah, it could be. I said, but, I'm just very aware of it. So, yeah, the course went on. We did a couple of things, like went out and did a sweat lodge down in the neighbouring town. And then kind of came back. And then, the course wasn't really as much fun as the last one. There was a few discordant personalities on it, and it made it a bit more, a bit less enjoyable than the first time round. But, just got on with it. And so on one of the sort of last nights, it got to the point where Ken was like, we've got too many people in the house. Do you want to go out, so we can make some space? Would you be happy, because you're one of the guys, would you be happy to go out and sleep in the back of this guy, Mike, one of the guys who was there, great guy? And would you be happy to go and sleep out in the back of Mike's truck? And I was like, well, not unless you're going to give me a gun. I was like, are you kidding? I told you there's something out there. We're being stalked. I was like, you can't just put me out there like I'm a piece of prey, like a piece of bait. I was like, can you please take it seriously? So anyway, I wasn't made to go and sleep out in the truck. But like a day later or 2 days later, myself and April went out, sat down, had a little campfire going out in the dell. And so you come out of the front door of the property, you'd go literally to the right. There's like a white beam fence and a gap in the fence where you come through like the gate. Round to the right into the dell. It was, obviously not that late at night, but it was still pitch black because it's obviously winter. We had the fire rake there and a great big flashlight. So we've been there for probably an hour, chatting away, just hanging out. And then in the wood line, which was kind of directly ahead from us, probably, I'd say no more than 150 feet at the most, if I'm trying to guesstimate as memory serves. There's a load of kind of commotion, and directly in front of us, a great big white-tailed deer appears, comes running out of the wood line. I don't know whether it saw us, probably saw us. It turns literally 90 degrees to its left, straight away runs straight down the wood line, running parallel to the wood line, but more obviously in the open. And then it's followed by 4 others in swift succession. And they're big animals. So like I say, when we see a deer in the UK, it's a bit of a surprise because they're so rare here. Obviously they're much more like a pet animal if you see one, or if you see one in the wild, it's quite an enigma. So I was like, oh wow, big deer. And then something else came forward. And by this time, I grabbed the flashlight and I was holding the flashlight onto the kind of game trail bit in the wood, I suppose, where they were coming through. And And then what appeared was a pair of large forward-facing eyes. And so April said, "Oh, what is that? Is that another deer?" And I just immediately said, "No, it's got forward-facing eyes. That's a predator." And she said, "Oh." I said, "Whatever that is, that was chasing the deer." Anyway, I mean, we had a big campfire going. I've got a big flashlight full on this thing's face. It just stopped just inside the wood line. At the distance it was, I would estimate that its eyes, which were like large round eyes, they did give off a kind of greeny yellow eye shine, and it blinked, but it didn't flee. It stood its ground and just stayed there, fixated on us. And what it reminded me of was, when you see a wolf or a big predator, when they kind of like hunker down and they lower their head and really focus on their prey before they lunge, it looked or felt exactly like that. Now, this flashlight was a very powerful flashlight, but it could not pick up or illuminate this thing's features. It was like it was blacker than black, almost like it absorbed the light, and all you saw were these massive eyes. So I've always said that the head on this thing must have been the size of a big male Bengal tiger or bigger, really big, because of how far the eyes were apart. Probably about almost like the span of my hand. If I open up my thumb and my forefinger, it's, almost probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches apart. It's a big head on whatever it was. And I just didn't think you had anything in the US that large. I don't think mountain lions get anything like that large. Plus, I didn't think it would stay and kind of have a Mexican standoff with us. So I didn't waste any time. And I said to April, "Right, hold the flashlight, keep it on its face. I'm going to grab the fire rake. We're going to have to get in the house." And so in those kind of moments, you just sort of, for me, I just shut down into what's kind of practical and what you just need to do to survive. This thing just watched us intently, and we had to go forward a little bit towards it diagonally to get round this fence, this white fence, to get into the house. So we had to kind of come forward about sort of 20 feet before we could run back towards the house. So we didn't turn our backs on it, kept facing it. And I said, keep that light right in its face. So we managed to get back into the house, and, it was a bit like, well, what was that? Sorry, Vic. But yeah, it really was like, what on earth was that? What could it be? But it felt like that it was coming towards the end of the course, and it finally showed itself and just menaced us, but didn't try and attack us. Yeah, very, very strange. So, and then obviously I came back. We started heading back. We went off traveling to Santa Cruz, and then a message. Ken and his wife had bought a couple of baby goats. And after the course had finished, they went out and got these baby goats, and they kind of took them back to the house, and where they had some, sort of like in the kind of backyard area. I can't remember if they had horses or not. I think they might have had some stables area. Anyway, they tethered these baby goats, these kids, up outside. And so, less than a week later, a few days later, we got a message through by email, because there wasn't any internet at that time, saying that the baby goats had been shredded. Literally, they came out one morning and the goats were just shredded, like torn to pieces. And then the kind of question began, almost like a witch hunt of whose negative energy created this happening. And one of the guys that had been on the course was an ex-cop, and he was like, "Yeah, hang on, what about this big black dog thing that was going around?" And I was like, "I told you there was a predator going round." It's like, no, this was something else. We were being stalked. You put live food in temptation in its way, and it basically shredded your goats. So yeah, it was a bit, anyway, it just created a big rift in the kind of group in the community. And I think people were sort of like pointing fingers and saying, oh, this person said this and that person said that. So anyway, it sort of created a big sort of aftermath. But I just went home and kind of got on with life. But the memory of that never left me. And so I began to, like I say, as the 20th anniversary was approaching, I began to sort of think about, well, what was that? Had I had an encounter with a Sasquatch, or what was this thing about it being a canine? Now, there wasn't really any internet at the time, like I said, so we had never, had the chance to sort of research and get into any depth in it. And the whole Dogman phenomenon had never been on my radar, or I don't think many other people's radar. So that's when I saw a couple of, I think there were some spoof YouTube videos about the Dogman, and that's where it kind of led me. And eventually I, found Vic's podcast and began listening to the episodes, and it finally sort of made sense that, well, although there have been reports of Sasquatch in Mountain Ranch, California over the years, that what I had encountered, I'm sure, was a Dogman. And so obviously the more I've listened to the encounters, the more it's kind of brought back other memories from my own life, right from early childhood. So I've begun to see that there is a pattern with these things, that I have encountered them for a long time in my life. That encounter in the US was a very physical and real one. That was a real creature. Whatever it was, it clearly had intelligence and it had real presence. So other times I've had the encounters have been very different. And I was explaining this to Vic when we first spoke, that the earliest memory I have from my childhood, and I still see it vividly now in my mind. So because it was so long ago, I can't tell you whether this is a dream or whether this is a real memory, but it's absolutely clear. And where I was born in England, in the UK, back in 1970, was a little town called Hullbridge. And that is on in Essex, in the county of Essex, and it's on a river called the River Crouch. One of the early episodes I remember listening to somewhere along my journey with investigating this, and I think it may have been on one of the early episodes of Vic's podcast, was somebody from the UK reporting an experience of being chased across a bridge over the River Crouch by some kind of werewolf creature. Now that made me go, oh, now Hullbridge was on the River Crouch. So the experience, which I think, was it a dream or is it a memory? Well, maybe these things are connected. So where the house was on a bit of low-lying flatland, right at the bottom of the little town, and it's a really tiny town, like a one-road town down to the river. But where we were was on the lower part. Then the town the road went up a little hill and then straight, and then it obviously ended in the River Crouch. So we're right at the start, not far from the main road. There's a little supermarket on the corner of the road. As you kind of come, you turn left, go up the road, which would take you eventually to the river. But on the left was the little supermarket back in the 70s. And then the house I was born in was the next property with an adjoining wall into the car park of the supermarket. So the house I was born in had a relatively long garden, probably about 100 feet long or so, big willow trees at the end of it. But dividing it from the neighbouring property was a huge hawthorn hedge. It was extremely dark, very thick, very dense. obviously very thorny, but it was probably about 15 feet high, at least 10, maybe 15 feet high, really big hedge, ancient hedge. So the memory is I've come out of the back door onto the patio, which had steps down into the garden. I'm only very little, I'm about 2, but I'm walking and I can see myself clearly. My little body, my little face, I can see I'm wearing a nappy or, little pants, bare legs. So I've gone down the garden. Now it's very early morning. It's a very misty morning. So it's still sort of not semi-darkness, but that time before dawn. And I've walked down the middle of the garden and I've looked to my right and turned to my right, and there's the hawthorn hedge towering above me. And in the mist on top of this hedge, there are a collection of figures, of creatures, all fur covered, all very supernatural looking, ranging 7 to 8 feet high, some with tails, some with not tails, but they all have long snouts of different description. They don't look particularly wolf-like, but they are all very much along that line. Large hair-covered creatures with long muzzles, with teeth. Fearsome-looking things to behold in the mist, but they are almost appearing supernatural, because how could something so heavy stand or sit on that hawthorn hedge without crushing it entirely? So I wasn't afraid. I remember just looking up, and they just acknowledged me. And I say that's the strangest part of it, that they were there to simply acknowledge my being, that acknowledge me coming into incarnation, if you like, that I was there and I was sentient, aware, and could walk. But there was about 7 of them at the most. It might have been 5. It's hard to remember because it is a very strange impression, but that is what I have left, and that's my earliest memory back from childhood. So it was only when I began to connect with Vic's show that I began to sort of put some of this stuff together and say, well, there seems to be a strange theme. What are these things? These are clearly supernatural beings that I saw, but then I have obviously had a physical encounter. So that would have been around 1972. Then there's another memory where it kind of broke the dream of it when I went on a family holiday. My nan's side of the family, my mum's mum, they were from Wales. So we used to try and get back for a Welsh holiday into South Wales when we lived in Essex. And this would have been around 1973. So we went off with Nan and Grandad, travelled all the way across land. It's quite a way from the east right into the west of South Wales. And there was a point in the journey, it was late at night, and we seemed to have stopped at an old pub. And it seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. So me being a little kid, I probably got bored. It's, adults sat around having a drink after they're having a break from the driving. So Nan offers to take me outside. And so I remember going out of the door with her, and then so this pub was on a little road. I have no idea where this place was. I couldn't tell you. But we sort of turned to the right, and it seemed that the one kind of remaining light on the road, or the lights outside the pub, it faded into darkness, and there seemed to be a farmyard next to this pub. So if you come out the pub, turned right, the farmyard would have been along that side. At least there was a gate. And so I had this memory years ago, and all I remember was Nan was taking me down there. Then we saw a bunch of orange eyes, and the next thing, my Nan has panicked and she's grabbed me. She ran, she fell over, really cut her arm and her knee. And she's got me inside the pub, and there's a huge panic. Now, for years, I mean, my nan grew up in, the earlier part of the century, and they had a lot of rats in the old houses they used to live in. So as a kid, she was terrified because the rats used to be inside the walls. And she had a massive fear of rats. And so what she said was she had seen these orange eyes, and she thought it was a rat migration. And so for many, many years, I just kept that memory as, well, that's what maybe it was rats. Never thought about it until you start to realize about the kind of common thread amongst the experiences with dogmen of orange eyes. And when I remember, and I've sat down and kind of meditated and gone back into that memory, well, what I remember was not seeing a sea of rats on the floor with a multitude of eye shine. I remember distinctly seeing about 5 or 6 sets of amber eyes open in that gateway. In the darkness, these eyes appeared, and they weren't on the ground, and they weren't tiny like rats' eyes. They were big. They were all probably about 5 or 6 feet off the ground. There was a couple of larger ones, and then there was a couple of smaller ones. So I remember the larger ones were on the sort of left-hand side, and the smaller ones kind of going down to the right. But about 5, 6 sets of eyes opened. And that's when my nan screamed and panicked and ran. So I think what we had was an encounter in South Wales in the early 70s. And to me, it's made sense now that, well, no, that was probably more a hunting pack of dogmen. And that's why Nan ran, but she couldn't process what they would be. And obviously, it's taken me decades to figure this out. So that happened a few years later, no more than sort of 1975. My mum and dad split up. There was a very messy breakup, very traumatizing for me. I ended up living with my nan and granddad for a while. My mum then set up home with my now ex-stepfather. And I was kind of 6, I think, before I went to live with them. And then 1 year into the relationship, we went to, it was Halloween, and my stepfather's kind of troubled alcoholic older brother and his wife had moved to this place in Harwich, which is a port town on the kind of east coast of the UK in Suffolk, the county of Suffolk. And it was Halloween. So we drove up there, and this house was on a kind of development where this was probably one of the last properties on this plot of land, and it was on a bit of a hill. It looked over this kind of waste ground going down, I suppose, over the other developments into the town. So it was sort of at the top of a hill, and kind of out. It wasn't surrounded by lots of other properties. There was probably a couple of other properties where this development had just sort of finished. So as a little sort of 7-year-old kid, I'm there, and it's all adult stuff, adults getting drunk, adults misbehaving, picking up on all the weird stuff going on. And then my mother, who, definitely was a very odd individual, decided it'd be great if we did a Ouija board. Which everyone was like, oh, okay, yeah, great. And I thought, oh no, don't do that. And you're like a 7-year-old kid, and you think, that's terrifying. So they got bits of paper out, wrote down all the alphabet, all the sort of yes, no things, got a glass, and all sat round the kind of like pine dining room table, up against the wall. And just, I had to sit there with them. I had nowhere else to go. So I'm kind of like sat in one corner while these 4 adults get their hands on the glass, and they start asking it questions, led by my mother. I look back on it now, and you just think, what on earth were you thinking, subjecting a little child to a Ouija board? And I think if that gives you any idea what kind of person that she was, probably still is, It's why I have nothing to do with her anymore in my life, because that's a really frightening, terrifying thing. And to do it without any consideration of a kid, it's like, yeah, you've got to have some screws loose in there somewhere. So anyway, this is when I first became aware of my ability to sense things, because as they're doing this Ouija board, I'm sitting there in kind of, not abject terror, but I'm pretty scared. And I kind of closed my eyes and I'm wanting it to be over. Well, what was really scaring me was the fact that as they're doing the Ouija board, and it's Halloween night, I can feel this horde, this sea of entities, discorporate spirits, all kind of horrible things, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, astral entities, literally being drawn like moths to a flame to this Ouija board. And it terrified me because I could feel them all around, coming closer and gathering round this Ouija board going on. So as it progressed, I'm getting more and more kind of like looking, either way around me, thinking, oh, they're coming through the windows, they're coming through the doors. We are literally surrounded by a sea of them. They're all there watching, being drawn to it. And anyway, so they're going anyway. So the glass began to spin around the table, like, and it gets heavier and heavier to the point where it's starting to go. It's actually beginning to scratch the varnish on the surface of this table, and all four of these adults are lurching as this thing's going round, and it grew to this crescendo, and I couldn't bear it any longer. And in my mind, I just yelled, "Stop!" And this glass, it was like somebody had smacked it with a fist. It literally stopped like it had been bolted to the table. Their hands all flung off it. And then it kind of like the energy burst. And my little mind just went, oh, I can change it. I can affect it. So it's a very strange, but very kind of adult comprehension of something for a 7-year-old. So particularly on that kind of level. And it seemed to disperse all of the entities. It seemed to shift the whole thing. But I think it shocked. They didn't try and attempt to do it again. That was it. They were like, yeah, okay. That was a bit scary, wasn't it? Let's put it all away. So, yeah, a very, very strange experience. So, from there on in, I would go and see my dad every sort of 3 weeks to a month. Back in Essex, Dad was really into his movies. He was one of those people that loves gadgets, so he had the first kind of VCR. And we used to go to the video shop. Now, American Werewolf in London came out in 1981. So I remember watching that, age 11. Still think it's an amazing film, pretty terrifying. Yeah, never want to catch myself on the moors at night, although I went on to do that in adult life. Now I wouldn't do it. But also, at that time, my dad's half-sister, my Aunt Denise, had married a tech sergeant in the USAF. And so she got back in touch with my mum. They were always quite good mates. And turns out they were living in Suffolk on Woodbridge Air Base, which is in Rendlesham Forest, as people might know who are into that subject. So there's a whole other experience that I had around Rendlesham Forest in 1981. But in 1982, so I met my American cousins, Eric and Tom, and her husband Dean, and I got to tour the Woodbridge base, as it was a USAF base with the A-10s stationed there, and went to the open days and, got to do trick or treat for the first time in my life in 1981 for Halloween. The following year, we ended up traveling. My stepdad worked for an American company, CICA. I think the Combined Insurance of something of America. But they had a big event on and everyone was invited over. We ended up going to Florida, traveling around. And then Denise and Dean had moved back to Edwards Air Force Base. So they'd arranged for us to go over and stay the second part of the holiday. My little brother, half-brother, had been born in 1981. He stayed with my nan. And so it was myself, my mum and my stepdad that travelled out there because he was only a babe in arms. He was too young to kind of travel. So yeah, had a very interesting experience over in Edwards Air Force Base and traveling around all of the sites there, the Mojave Desert, going off into Nevada. And so, yeah, there's missing time from somewhere in the middle of Nevada that's never quite ever been recovered, no matter what I've done, but who knows. But what I remember seeing out there was the first time I watched The Howling, and how terrifying that was. Always the enduring memory of the scene where the person tries to hide in the woodpile and the werewolf's arm kind of comes after them. I still see it now vividly in my mind. So yeah, coming back into the UK, and there's been some sort of interesting experiences. I've gone on and joined the Air Cadets. I've met my lifelong friends, Rich and Lance, the twins that I've known for years. You know, we sort of get to hang out, and then there was an encounter one night in probably 1984 to 85. School disco. Well, not school disco. No, it was a disco, a young person's disco, like a youth, disco, organised in a town that's probably about 10 miles away from the little village that I ended up living in. And I got let down by my lift, but a couple of the lads that I knew said, "Oh, don't worry, you can get a lift back with us." And they were so the small village that I lived in was a village called Little Waldingfield. And there was a neighbouring village called Great Waldingfield, which had its church nearly in the boundaries of Little Waldingfield. The town that the guys were going to was a place called Lavenham. It's a really, really old town in Suffolk. So they said, "Oh, well, we'll drop you off on the way." And I thought, great, I'm going to walk back. It's full moon. And I've kind of, got my dancing shoes on. It's the 80s. We're all into, the baggy chinos and the kind of pastel coloured shirts. And so anyway, there's two ways to get to Lavenham. You can kind of follow the main road, or you could go through Little Waldingfield. So the taxi they were in drives up and then says, "Oh, yeah, okay, we'll drop you here now." And I was like, "Oh, you're not going through my village?" And they were like, No, we're going straight up here." And it suddenly made me go, "Oh no," because it's about 1.5 miles back to the village from that junction. So picture it, it's like the archetypal horror film setting. You step out of the taxi, your friends are like, "Bye," zoom off, they go. The road's in front of you. Now, Suffolk is quite flat generally. It's all cornfields. Yeah, so it's great. Full moon. Over to my right, across the fields, there is the medieval church of Great Waldingfield. And there is a good 1.5 miles of road between where I've stood and my house. So I start kind of, okay, off we go. Let's just get this done. So start walking, probably about a couple of 100 yards. On the left, there was a house of a guy I knew from years ago. He was one of my younger friends. And he lived there with his mum. Everything was like dark. So I walked past that house. It set off the road. And then there was always this little piece. So as the road kind of went ahead, it went up a little bank, like a little rise, not very much. Bent round and then kind of went straight again. Either side. Now it was I think it was like a culvert over what would have been a brook, a little stream of some kind, but it had really dense, and always had dense, really dense kind of hawthorn thickets and trees all around it. It was always a patch of ground that I never liked crossing, and I was always wary of it. So obviously that's the kind of in my mind that I've got to go past that piece of ground anyway. As I'm walking on the last bit of road that's bordered by the cornfields. I'm looking across to the old church. Across this cornfield, so there's like a hedge, like a little bank, then like a cornfield. And the dividing hedgerow in that field, there was a very small tree. And it had a kind of interesting sort of little dome shape. I think it might have been a young oak tree or something like that. But it was, no, it was probably less than 10 feet tall. Wasn't very big. And for some reason, I just got fixated on it. And I remember looking across at it. And I'm like, why am I staring at this tree? And as I looked at it, it was suddenly violently shaken. Like somebody had got hold of it and just gone and shook it. So the leaves are rustling, it's shaking like mad. Now, it was a big enough tree that you'd have had to have been a pretty strong guy to shake it like that. And there was no animal that's going to be shaking a tree of that size so hard. There's nothing out there. I can't understand why there would be anybody out there anyway that was waiting for me to walk past and then, saw me across the field and decided to shake it just to terrorize me. So I never saw what did that. And I can tell you now that I didn't hang around to find out what did that. I ran for my life as fast as I could up the road, past all the dark thicket, up the little hill, and I'm on the kind of like flat straight where there's a bit of a footpath. So I'm running along the footpath, and it's open cornfields, probably a good 3/4 to half a mile of open ground where you've got no cover, no protection whatsoever, no houses. So I could see the village ahead of me, and it was literally like, full tilt, head back, arms pumping by my sides, heart bursting out of my chest, because I'm thinking any minute now it's going to get me, any minute now it's going to get me. And I ran and ran and ran, and obviously I'm in slippy going out shoes. So all these things are racing through my mind, and I could just feel that it was flanking me on the right behind me, but nothing got me. I ran and jumped over the little garden fence, ran, and literally I'm panicking trying to get in the house. And yeah, so then I get shouted at for waking everybody up. But I never told them what went on, because at that point the relationship with my mum and stepdad had really sort of broken down. So it was like everything I did was wrong, everything I did was bad, my fault. So what's the point? But so within a year they'd moved. My stepfather got a promotion. They'd moved up to bought a house in Shropshire, and he got a promotion to the head office in Crewe for this company. I stayed down with my nan and granddad. I had all my friends there. I was a air cadet in the local air cadet branch. We were doing survival courses. You were sort of like starting to have the first girlfriends. I was playing rugby for the rugby team. So my whole life was there. And because of the relationship being so toxic, on the parents' side, I didn't want to move to Shropshire. I never wanted to go there. I tried to stay with my friends, with my nan and granddad, but in the end, I'm 16, 17, you've got no rights, you're not an adult yet, and things are very different back in those days. It's not like it is now, with all the safeguarding laws that we really, have and we really need. I just wanted to be away from the abuse, but I couldn't escape it. So in the end, I was kind of forced, finished my exams and was kind of forced to move up there. So it would have been 1987, summer of 1987. And this house was set off a main road. It was in an area of woodland. It was just in a kind of patch of ground, like a bit of a field that was outside the woodland, but still next to a big main road, which is now a very busy road. And it was close to a town in Shropshire called Whitchurch. And this place was called Higher Heath. In between Whitchurch and Higher Heath, there was an old airbase. a World War II airbase that was disused, but you could still see remnants of the old buildings throughout the woods. So as you came to the property, if you came up the main road, if you were travelling north towards Whitchurch, you would come to this turn off. You would go right into a kind of cinder track into the woods. Immediately on the left, there was an old grain dryer, this big kind of stark, ominous looking building, but it was disused. Big old sort of black looking building, part brick, part corrugated iron, I think. And then you'd kind of go no more than probably 50, 60 yards, maximum 100 yards. So where the cinder track went, there would be a line of woodland, and then our property would be running along behind that line of only a strip of woods, probably no more than sort of 30 feet wide in a strip, but obviously all the woods would be to your left-hand side, and then as you got forward, the woods went off over a fence and a gate into the main woodland. So you used to have to literally come up the cinder track, double back to get into the house through the gates that we ended up putting on there. So I ended up going to college in a big town in Shropshire called Shrewsbury. I used to come back quite late at night. So coming back one sort of November night, get off the little bus across the road, have to cross the main road, come down on the cinder track. So I'm 17 at the time, pretty fit, pretty strong, pretty cocky. Coming to the woodland, and I heard things running off into the undergrowth as I come down the cinder track, mainly to my left. And I thought, oh yeah, usual thing, rabbits, whatever. Carried on walking down a little bit further, and then I heard something heavier. And I thought, no, it's not a rabbit. It must be someone's dog or something. Anyway, still pretty nonchalant, not really bothered. Walked a little bit further, and as I'm coming towards the grain dryer, and sort of around probably the midway through in the grain dryer where it sat, I kind of just got compelled to turn around because I could hear some noise. I thought, what is that? So I'm looking back, and you can kind of vaguely see in the darkness, you can see the two bits of woodland where it ends, and there's the main road. There's the entrance to the cinder track off the main road. There's other houses there. And to my right, where the patch of woodland that runs along the side of the road is, just past the edge of the grain dryer, I'm just sensing something. So I'm really staring at this place in the woods thinking, what is it? And I thought, I'll just wait and see. And then I got this overwhelming feeling of dread. And the more that I looked, I could see there was something, but it was almost like a shadow that just absorbed the light. It was darker than dark, like it was a hole in space kind of thing. I was like, what? Yeah, am I seeing things? I mean, it's pitch black anyway, but... And then this damn thing stepped towards me, or it stepped towards the path, I should say. So it moved so that I could see it. And it did this on purpose. And what it revealed was a humanoid shape, absolutely pitch black, like a void. It was about 6.5 to 7 feet tall, but it was clearly human shaped. But when it had stepped, it broke a twig. Now, this is where we get this crossover into the weirdness of, well, are these things supernatural or are they physical? Are they physically present or are they cloaked? Well, that was it for me. It filled me with primal terror that I have never felt anywhere before or since. It really was the most terrifying thing, beyond what it represented. Just the emanation of this thing was absolute terror. And I was frozen initially, and then I literally spun and I ran for my life, straight up the cinder track, doubled back, literally hurdled the gates, ran straight to the house, got into the utility door, let the dogs out. The dogs went berserk, barking, howling, yapping. They tore off towards the woods up to the end gate. And I just stood there shaking. And I still, no matter where I've been across ancient sites in different places in the world, up the hills at night, in the full moon, in the woods at night by myself, never felt terror like this thing emanated or invoked in me, whichever you want to call it. It made me, that's what I felt. So this thing carried on for years. It never really showed itself again physically, not to me. It did show itself to my brother in dreams before it finally, we feel it finally breached the house and got in, but that's long after I'd left. But you could go out there in daylight, go out through the gates and face towards this old bit of woods where the grain dryer was. So you're looking roughly towards where the main road is, and the main body of the old woods, the big old woods, is behind you. And even in the daylight, there was some presence that if you went there with the intention that you were going to face it down, you just felt like you were being watched. And this is where, for me, what so many of the experiencers describe who've had cryptid encounters, particularly with Sasquatch or Dogmen, that feeling of being watched. And I thought, and that's why the story to me was so compelling, because when I started listening to those encounters over the last kind of 10 years, it made me go, oh, whoa, that's what I used to feel. But I felt it. I mean, I lived there off and on, for like 9 years. And this thing never diminished. It was there. It was, no matter, I really got into my spiritual path in my sort of 20s. And even then, I could never quite pin down what that thing was, nor could I ever face it down, because no matter how bold and brassy I felt, and I've been out there in daylight, I've been out there at night and just decided I was going to kind of challenge it, that thing always got me to back down. It would get to a point where it was so malevolent feeling. It was like, no, okay, yeah, fair enough, I'm going. But to give you an example of it, my little brother and myself, we were into like miniatures war games like D&D and Warhammer and everything. And we used to, so there's 11 years between us. And, I was my brother was still really young. And I was at that point sort of in my early 20s. And we used to just go and hang out in the workshop that was ended up being built behind the garage on the property. But it was built right up against the fence that was the perimeter line of that little strip of woods, roughly opposite the grain dryer on the other side of the cinder track. So we'd be hanging out in the workshop, chatting, laughing, painting our miniatures, just chilling like brothers do. And you would just feel that silence fall, that change in the ether. And we both look at each other and go, oh, it's here. And you could feel this thing come up to the fence. It was there. You could feel it. It was a big and forceful thing. It was not nothing. It carried the most immense presence with it. And then we'd be like, okay, put the paintbrushes down. It's time to get in the house. And then, of course, you'd have to kind of come out of the workshop. And there was a little kind of ginnel where the garage was, a little wood store. And it would take you to such a close proximity to the fence. You were within what you'd imagine to be like an arm's reach of this thing. So we used to kind of like get there and run through this bit and kind of get through the gate, get into the house as quick as we could. So yeah, we never used to go out and linger anywhere near that thing at night. It was like, no, you just don't do that. So it went on that way for a number of years. I ended up, like I say, moving out. And after I'd left and took all my stuff with me, it took my little brother a while before he told me the story of this, but he started having my stepdad had moved out by this time, so it was just my mum and the dogs and my little brother in the house at the time. And he'd ended up moving into my stepfather's room at the kind of end of a corridor in the house, in the upstairs, on the side of the woods, overlooking the drive. And on the drive, there were 3 security lights, one at the gate, one halfway down, and one by the garage. And he said they'd had a few nights where something had set off the security lights one after the other. Gate, halfway down the drive. It's a gravel drive, so anybody that was walking down it, you'd have heard a person walking down it. Lights go off by the garage. It happened a couple of times. And then I remember now, he said, it set the car alarm off on my mum's car. But they'd gone out looking, and they let the dogs out. There's no one there. So it seemed it had ramped it up. Now, my brother said, I started getting this recurring dream. And in this dream, I'm running through the house. I'm locking all of the patio doors, the French windows, the doors. We had a big conservatory in the end down the side of the house that faced out to the woods and a utility. And he said that he had this dream. He used to run around, shut the doors, because he felt this thing was trying to get in. Never saw it, just had the idea that something was trying to get in the house. And he had to shut all the windows and doors and lock them. And he said then the last night that this happened to him, he was in bed with his girlfriend. He was dreaming this dream. And he said, and I was running around locking all the doors like I did in sequence. And I got to the utility door. I came out of the utility door and I was too slow. And as I ran down to the main part of the conservatory, down the sort of like little glass corridor bit, it came through the doors. And he said, it's exactly like you described it, Nath. It's this large, dark humanoid form came through the doors, emanating this, not necessarily evil, but just this malevolent, powerful, ancient presence. And he said, you see in the films where the person is running, they see this thing, they can't stop, and they slip over on the floor, kind of slide towards it, and their legs are backpedaling. He said, and I'm trying to get away from it as it's come through the door, and it's massive. It's about 7 feet tall. It's kind of ducked through the door, stood up. It's huge and menacing. He said, I'm backpedaling, and as it comes towards me, he said, I managed to get up and run, and I get back to the utility door, lock it, shut it, put the bolt on. And he said, anyway, then I woke up in bed, sweating, and he said, and then I heard the stairs creak. And this corridor that ran down to the end where that bedroom was, it had this, that kind of chipboard flooring, and it was not a very well-built house. It used to creak quite a lot if you couldn't walk on that floor without anyone hearing you, you wake up the whole house. And he said, we heard it. I woke my girlfriend up and we heard it come down the corridor, and he said we could feel its presence outside the bedroom door, almost like it was breathing darkness, like it was like, every time it breathed, it expanded its aura through the walls. And so when I'd left this really interesting sort of African curved like cleaver scimitar thing as a protection thing for him. It wasn't like a live blade sharp sword. It was like like an ornament, but I always felt it had some sort of talismanic protection element to it. So he grabbed that and he said to his girlfriend, on the count of 3, I'm going to open the door, and whatever's out there is going to get swung. This sword's going to hit it. He's like, I'm absolutely terrified. And so he got her to literally, on the count of 3, switch the light on. He opens the door, takes a swipe at whatever would be out there. And he said there was absolutely nothing there. It completely vanished. And that seemed to be the sort of culmination of the experiences there for him. He ended up moving out, going to university. So that is a Now, some people have seen these things and they think that these are what they call a woodwos. And I disagree. I don't think that is a woodwos. I think that's something else. I have experienced what I think was a woodwos encounter. So in 1987, when myself and Richard Lance, we'd all finished school, before I sort of eventually went back up to Shropshire, we had a holiday on a piece of land, farmland, owned by their relatives in South Wales. So it's just three lads, a tent, in a little bit of a field under an old oak tree by the woodlands. Absolute paradise, proper boys' own camping experience. We were there for, I think, probably about 10 days, something like that. Really, really nice summer weather. So where we had the old sort of 3-4-man tent, there was a great big oak tree. We built a little fire pit, some rocks, and then the tent was kind of on the opposite side of that. And we had a lot of interesting experiences there. First time I'd ever heard foxes calling in the wild in a rainstorm. It was really eerie coming out of the woods. But anyway, one night, so we've had a great night. We've gone to bed, left the kind of campfire in front of the tent. We're all sort of tired out. We retired, gone to bed, laid down, and then I think we'd all sort of drifted off a little bit, and then I think Lance was in the middle, Richard's on the other side. We're all laying in the same direction, and I'm pretty sure it's Lance that nudged me and was just whispered, look out the tent, look out the end of the tent. And he's woken Richard up, and we've all gone really quiet, looked up, and honestly, Vic, there in front of the tent, crouched over our fire, was a human figure. If I could have described it to you, I would say it was like a proto-human, like a caveman or something like that. Not very big. Probably would have been about 5.5 feet tall. Probably, no more difference than us in size. And it was crouched over the fire. And we were all like, what the bleep is that? Who's that? Who's outside? We're in the middle of nowhere. Who's outside the tent? So anyway, it's like, right, we're going to get them. So we had our army knives, our survival knives. And so obviously it was me that was chosen to be the bravest and boldest. And I got pushed to the front of the tent. And it was one of those things, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, we're going to unzip the tent and I'm going to jump this person because they're messing with us. What are they doing? So it was, 1, 2, 3, zip. And I kind of lunge out of the entrance of the tent, and there is nothing there, nobody. And there was nothing in between the fire and the tent. And bearing in mind, there's all 3 of us are seeing this thing. It's not just like one of us and, the other 2 have gone, oh, well, maybe. It's like, no, we all saw what we saw. And then, so everyone's looking at the tent now. We're all going, well, what was that? Well, that was a person. And it was, I think Rich that said, well, I think it might be a woodwos, or, could it be what they call the oak man, the spirit of the oak tree, or the things that live in the oak trees. These are all things from legend. So anyway, we were just like, I don't know what it was. So zip the tent back down, lay back down. And then about 10 minutes later, I get another nudge, and this thing's back again, squatting down over the fire. And then it was a case of, well, we don't really know what that is, but, it's not doing us any harm. In fact, maybe it's watching over us. I don't know. Let's just leave it be. But the thing that struck me the other day when we were talking about, are these creatures supernatural? Are they physical? And people talk about cloaking. People have seen Sasquatch and Dogmen both cloak and uncloak. At least that's the reports. So in my mind, I suddenly thought, well, why could we see it as a shadow on the tent? And there was nothing in front of the fire that cast a shadow. And it couldn't cast a shadow like a squatting human being. without being a squatting human being shape. So when I unzipped the tent and couldn't see it, and then obviously we zipped the tent back up and it kind of reappeared, what it made me think of is, okay, could it be that when these things cloak, I was saying speech marks, do they bend light, but maybe they don't block it? So this thing maybe it was cloaked, but the firelight, the actual light traveling from the fire, still cast its silhouette onto the outside of our tent, because it was physical on some level. And so maybe when I, went out to kind of like jump it and see what it was literally invisible to the naked eye. But that's why it kind of reappeared, because it probably was physically solid. And although we perhaps couldn't see it with our physical eyes because it was cloaked or something like that, it still cast a shadow because it was a solid creature of some kind. So it is a very strange thing. And I'll say that the last experience that happened to me in recent years was probably around 2015, around the time that I began this journey of exploration. Now, I've had a lot of strange UFO stuff over the years and seen all manner of things. But I was with Lance in his house in Suffolk. He lives in rural Suffolk, outside Bury St Edmunds. And it's not too far, probably about 25 miles from RAF Lakenheath and Mildenhall, the big US bases where we had all this drone activity recently. But this was around 2015. We were out in the back garden and it was nighttime. We were just out chatting, looking at the sky, looking at the stars. And away to the west, we saw some red lights, like landing lights on an aircraft. And where I used to live was near a base called RAF Watersham. It used to be a fighter base in the 80s, but then it's become a base for the Apache helicopters. And we see them quite a lot over that area. So we thought, maybe it's Apaches on maneuver, because these red lights in the distance, which looked just like aircraft landing lights, were kind of going up and down, not very high, just on the horizon, kind of up and down, a little bit side to side, like a helicopter would probably maneuver rather than a large jet. Now, it's not far, like I say, from the military bases, but also not far from Stansted, which is a large airport. So we didn't think anything of it. And then about an hour later, Lance said, do you fancy going for a walk up the road? I said, yeah, okay, yeah, great. Go and take the air. It's a nice night. So he came out of his little estate, turned left, walked out into the countryside along the road. And then we took another left. It's pitch black. I don't know the area at all, so I couldn't tell where I was. But we were heading down off the main road onto a side road down into a field. And then we spotted this red light. It was kind of red, but then sort of amber, shifting in colours. And again, it's relatively small. It's kind of going up, travelling across, going up and down, vertically, moving. And we were like, what are we looking at? And how far away is that? That's weird. And then all of a sudden, it all became put into sharp perspective, because a car appeared with its lights on, coming from left to right. And we suddenly saw we were in a large field, probably about 200 to 300 yards away from the boundary, the hedge line boundary, which was the boundary of the road. And in front of us were two regularly spaced telegraph poles. When this car appeared, this light, ducked. It was up one of the telegraph poles. It ducked down the telegraph pole. It hid below the hedge line, so the car couldn't see it. The car then passed, and everything went back to being black. And this thing went up, up the next telegraph pole. And then we were like, whoa. And then that became a game changer. Then we sort of moved a little bit closer. Lance was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "I don't know." And so then he sort of said, "Oh, shall we go over?" Now, by this time it had changed. So it had kind of come down. It had gone across from left to right. It was probably just to the right of the second telegraph pole. It then changed from reddy amber to a yellow white. And as we began to focus on it, I can only say that it became aware of us. But prior to that, before we saw the car and worked out what it was, this thing, which was clearly intelligent and sentient, was dancing up and down the telegraph pole, along the hedge, kind of just playing. And quite happily, quite innocently. But when we became more intent on getting closer to it, and it kind of must have sensed us, it grew in intensity, like somebody was pointing a torch beam right at us. So it went from being like just a glowing red orb to being something that was shining. And you get those kind of like rays of light that radiate when something's pointing right at you. It did that. And Lance was like, "Oh, should we go over and see it?" And I was like, no. We don't know what that is. Plus, and then as we were sort of thinking about that, there was a little tiny strip of woods next to us that sort of poked out, like a finger of woodland that poked out into that field on our right, that we sort of drew level with as we kind of went a little bit forward towards the orb and towards the hedge line. There was a massive snapping of a wood limb and something thudded to the ground. And I was like, "Okay, Lance, back out." And he was like, "What?" I said, "Just back out. No, we don't know what this is. We don't know what we were in the middle of. It's pitch black. Let's just honor it for what it is and let's back away." And so we did. We sort of backed out of the field. It stayed sort of focused on us, sort of hovering. It was really hovering probably about no more than about 2 or 3 feet above the ground at that point. So we discussed it afterwards, and the only thing we could compare it to in our kind of cultural knowledge or mythology from the UK was something that was called a will-o'-the-wisp, and that's what it seemed to be. So, and it was alive. It was just enjoying itself. It's clearly it was intelligent, it was sentient, but I felt it sense us, and it almost like became a bit of a Mexican standoff again, because it kind of grew in intensity, like it was getting ready to do something. And I didn't want either of us to get harmed, but also sometimes, we encounter these things, and it's like, why have humans always got to get their hands on stuff and try and pick it to pieces when we should just recognize and honor the fact that we've witnessed something miraculous, and maybe it's a manifestation of nature. It's a beautiful thing. It wasn't out to hurt us. Just honor it and walk away. And so we do think that maybe what we saw was a will-o'-the-wisp, but that clearly was a energy life form that clearly had physical presence, had sentience. It was aware. So I believe that we live in a very beautiful and interesting world where there are perhaps these creatures, and perhaps both things are true. Some of these things are physical, but they can also shift between the dimensions. I have no idea how the physics of that work. Maybe one day we will know it, but maybe we're not grown up enough or evolved enough yet in our consciousness to really embrace those things or be trusted with the secrets of them, because look at what a mess we make of most of the world. And I just think what a beautiful world we could live in if we knew all these answers and we just used all our energy and attention, all our money and resources in the right ways rather than in the destructive and divisive ways in which they seem to be used in most of the world. But there's clearly a bigger world out there than human beings have got the ability to embrace. But I think some of us are kind of getting there. For me, it just makes me more aware of what might be out there and makes me, keep my head on the swivel. But I'm like most of you, I really would love to know the answers. And I think now I've had a shift in life and I've kind of freed up sort of time and energy and resources. For me, that's what I want to go forward and go and explore. So there is a imminent US tour being planned as we speak. So if anybody wants to reach out, get in touch and connect, we'd love to come out there. I think if I can probably get Athena to come, she'd love that as well, to come and explore some of the mysteries out there. And hopefully we can find some of the answers together.
Being the magnet you are for scary things, like I said, I can only imagine what's going to happen if you make such a trip. And with that in mind, if anyone does want to reach out to you and offer a stay at their place or anything like that to accommodate you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, yeah, that will be lovely. So just reach out, email me. It's NathanSarea, that's SAREA, NathanSarea, all one word, @gmail.com. So, love to hear from people and love to connect with people. That's what I'm all about. And we'd love to come out and see some of the mysteries out there in the US and Canada again.
As hard to believe as it might be, I think you're just getting started when it comes to all the mysteries that are still left out there to be explored.
Could be, Vic. I think it's a pretty big universe. I have to say, folks, I think things are quickening at the moment. So whatever people think, I know we've been at this kind of thing with the cryptids for many, many years, but there are people out there with the knowledge, and I think we're getting closer to the answers of what these things are. And I really do hope, in fact, I really intend that we find the answers to these beings, that they feel that they can communicate with us. Our ancestors have got a massive history of communicating with these other realms and respect for them. I mean, there's been, stories of the werewolves in the forests in Europe for centuries, and also people connecting with the Fae, with the elementals, with the fairy realms, the Fae, which often resemble these, classic grey extraterrestrials. So I still believe that we have, both things are out there. There's interdimensional stuff and there is extraterrestrial stuff. So I think in the next few years, we are really going to see something. And I've had some very prophetic dreams that show things turning up. So let's hope we get the answers, because I just think what a beautiful world we would live in when we know more about the world we live in, if you get me.
I do get you. And of course, there would be life before and life after such revealing. And for some time now, there's been a lot of talk about that revealing. It does make you wonder if it's just around the corner. I guess time will tell on that. But having said that, Nathan, I can't thank you enough for coming on and share the details of all these experiences with us. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Vic. And sincerely, I've listened to you for a long time, and thank you for what you do, because talking people through the trauma of this, I am a trained therapist. I haven't put myself out there to do this work with people, but I feel that's what I'm being called to do, because I do know that so many people are struggling with this. And, as someone that struggles with trauma, and then also has this kind of other side to his life, how do you explain those things to regular, medical staff and therapists? It's very difficult, can be very lonely. And I think the isolation and the loneliness with something like this is the hardest thing. So, Vic, you do a great job. And I know you talk to so many people offline, and you talk them down and you help them out. And God bless you, sir, for what you do. So, I can tell you're one of the good guys. You're very, very genuine in what you do, and you do care. And that's, that's you. So you have my respect, Vic. You really do.
Well, thanks so much for all those kind words. I really wouldn't have it any other way, though. I just feel blessed to be in a position to help the eyewitnesses. I really do. But having said that, thanks again so much for your time, Nathan. I really do appreciate it. And in the future, if I can ever help you out, please let me know.
Thanks, Vic. I really appreciate that. Yeah, God bless. And, good luck, everyone.
Oh, no, you're welcome. God bless you and have a great night.